Thank you, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, councillors. I'm very loud tonight, so I'm going to move that away from myself. And good evening, officers. If I could please begin with our statement of acknowledgement. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we are meeting. We pay our respects to their elders and to elders from other communities who may be here today. Welcome to our ordinary meeting of February 18th, 2019. Do I have item 3, any apologies or requests for leave of absence? I believe Councillor Bennett, you need a leave of absence next council meeting? No? Okay. Is there any other requests for leaves of absence? No, but I do recognise and acknowledge our acting CEO, Deb Mudra, in the chair tonight, who took over from Leon, who acted for us in the month of January. So thank you, team, for stepping up. Item 4, declarations under acts, regulations, codes or local laws.
Persons are reminded that Council's meeting procedure local law prohibits the use of audio, video or still image recording devices unless prior approval has been given by the chairperson or by the Council.
Thank you. Item 5 is declarations by councillors of any conflict of interest. Councillor Hall.
Yes, I have for item 16.2 the Kinchington 173 agreement. Thank you.
And I have one for 8.4 for Havelock Street.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 12.1 and item 16.2. Thank you.
And councillors, I also have one for 16.2, the Kinchington Road, Leneva. Councillors, there's a few tonight, so I please ask you to make sure you wave madly at me so that I don't miss those as we go through. Item 6 is confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. The recommendation is there on page 3. Can I have someone move that? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Nearly forgot your name. Did anybody wish to speak against that motion? Councillors, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 7 is delegates' report, of which we have a special one from Councillor Bennett.
Councillors, as you know, I'm the delegate on the Greenhouse Alliance Committee, which is our committee, and there's heaps of different members, so pretty much from Towong to Murrindindi, all the councils in between. So we're the committee that looks at adapting to climate change and sustainability. So councillors would have received an email today with a letter that is being sent on behalf of council. So we have been made aware that the state government has some funding under the Green Government Buildings Program, and they're looking at maybe co-funding some work that we'd further invest in having more energy efficient lighting. So councillors, actually in our briefing today, we spoke about the LED lighting project and how that saves 12.5 grand a month for us with that lighting. So that's a great savings for us. So we're trying to get the government, the state government, to put in some more money. So I've written, we've had a letter from us that will be sent to support that.
Thank you. Do we need, that's just a report, councillors. Did anybody have any questions for Councillor Bennett? No? Thank you, Councillor. And I think that's a terrific initiative, because if we can get some funding to assist us, ultimately it absolutely assists us in saving money longer term, as well as doing all the fantastic environmental stuff. Okay, item 8.1 is the item before us, which is processes and procedures at council meeting and councillor briefings. The motion is there on page 13. Can I have someone move that? Someone? Councillor Bennett? Sure. No, you were looking like you wanted to say something. Hang on.
Yes, but also add an additional part as well. Sure. Yep. Yep. So councillors, you've got that in front of you. So additional part J, that officers investigate the display of agenda information, including motions, on a TV screen for viewing by the public gallery, and subject to the 2018-2019 budget constraints, the CEO be authorised to implement as appropriate.
Thank you. So, councillors, I'm taking it that it is all recommendation A, A on page 13 through to I, and then including part J. Is there somebody who would like to second that? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Bennett.
I think this is really good progress. So we're looking at how we can we're just looking to improve our processes and procedures around council meetings, and this is part one. We've got another part coming up, which is looking at our local law. So there's, again, more time to have some more say. I think this additional part is good. I've been over to the Albury Council meetings a couple of times, and they have a screen up there that actually runs through the agenda, and if they make any changes to motions, that actually comes up live. So that's quite handy for, say, if you come into the gallery, you know, a little bit later and you don't know where things are up to. I think it's just a good way of portraying to people in the gallery what's going on.
Madam Mayor, just to explain that the TV screens are actually behind me, hidden away behind panels, but I think it is just this improving our processes, which Councillor Bennett said, is that if we can keep improving our processes and delivery, and I think in time maybe even be able to, with motions like this on the go, actually printing them in as we go. So, but we'll have to evaluate all that as we go.
Councillor Bennett, just before you close, can I please just recognise Officer Scully, because he does an awful amount of work for all of us behind the scenes to make sure that our governance processes are robust. We're actually in line with legislation. He absolutely keeps on top of that. So can I please just say thank you for a great report, but also thank you for doing the work in the background to make sure that we are improving process and we're doing it as appropriate in line with legislation. Councillor Bennett.
Another point that I wanted to highlight in recommendation B is that the agenda for the ordinary council meetings be issued to the public at least 5 days in advance. So anyone that is keenly, watching what's happening at council, most of the time that comes out on the Friday before a Monday council meeting. So that does make it a bit difficult if community want to have a say on something. They've got to do that over the weekend. So this is a little bit better. It gives us a few more days for community to have their say on things. I mean, I'd love it to be 7, but it seems to be 5 is a good compromise.
Thank you. Councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.2 is the use of council land for circuses with exotic animals. There's a recommendation on page 32. Do I have a mover for that?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move a motion that Council accepts option 1, being do nothing. The status quo remains.
Can I just foreshadow if that doesn't get up another motion? So that is option 3. So everyone's got that in front of you. So that's pursue the development of a formal policy to ban the use of council land for a circus that involves the performance and display of exotic animals. This will require community consultation phase to ensure the views of the community are sought.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Speaking for the motion, the legislative and legal implications are paramount in my moving this motion. The information laid out in pages 30 and 31 in tonight's agenda make it very clear that this is our best option. Legal implications, if you read through that, are something that we should take very seriously. The letters that we've received from our legal advisors make that clear as well.
Okay, I've really given this motion a lot of consideration over the last few months, putting aside all my personal views and looking at this with open eyes and as a position as a councillor with regard to all Wodonga residents. A common sense position is what I'm supporting. I believe I've come to this with the help from the legal advice provided to the council, Kelmore lawyers, and I'll quote what they said, that the introduction of a policy will not in its own right limit a circus from acting within the municipal area. There is nothing to restrain the operators from dealing with on private landholders. This is a key point. No ban will stop circuses with exotic animals from setting up in Wodonga. So the key issue in banning these circuses may not achieve the objective this motion hopes to achieve. So, okay. There is an unintended spillover of other animal-human activities being restricted by such bans. I'm a realist and I see that this could happen as a consequence of a motion being put to the opposite of this being passed. Council report states that that the stance taken by Council on animal welfare grounds is unlikely to be able to be legally sustained or supported if challenged in a court. I'd really dislike to be in a position of using ratepayers' money to represent Council on an issue around this if it was to come to bear. This could become very expensive. If we lose the case, the Council would lose their objective, and the ratepayers would pick up the cost. The Lennon brothers have stated in the last report on this that they will not be breeding their lions on anymore, and they will be retiring their old lions and not replacing them. With this comment, I feel that they know that using exotic animals in their circus are a growing concern within communities, and using them for performances is not acceptable as it once was. I feel that having them made these comments, they are looking to address the community concerns going forward. I really believe if you support a ban on circuses with exotic animals from using council land, then you can support this by doing it with your feet. Don't go to circuses who have exotic animals as part of their performances. I have and have done for many years and will continue to do so. This, I feel, will have the greatest impact without having any spillover or unintended consequences to other animal-human activities. I will be supporting the officer's recommendation in the council meeting agenda report tonight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To some extent, I feel the legal advice that we've got supports most of the messages that I tried to convey before we passed the original motion that was later rescinded. And I think this advice is fairly consistent and shows that there are a whole range of things that could emanate from putting a ban of the nature that's been proposed in place, not least of which is something that could transfer onto other animal activities that are possibly not intended to be included in it. And I think that in itself is important. But the other things that come to my mind are there was 12,000 or thereabouts people who voted with their feet and went to the circus. And I think that speaks volumes as a part of our community. I think the amount of people that have spoken to me about this matter in one form or another, and some were very critical and accused me of actually causing the problems that happened. But the number of people that have spoken to me and said banning circuses is not the right answer, it's quite a lot of people, and I don't think I've had as much contact over any other issues than I have over this issue. So, having said all those things, I support the status quo recommendation or motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I'm going to state again, I've stated before that my personal view on this is probably irrelevant right now, what my personal opinion is, because I've always said I'd be a voice for the community and the people that contacted me when they had issues about something. So I'm going to continue to follow through on that path because I, like Councillor Mildren, have also been contacted by lots in the community. It seems to be a different reflection of the community, though, that the people that have contacted me were very supportive of this ban. And I took a lot away from the last time, you know, looking at the petitions, the validity of them, whether the people live within our region or out of our region, they were signing this petition or not. Which brings me back to the 12,000 people that did go to this circus, and I agree, it was well attended. But was that well attended from people from Albury or regionally or Indigo or Wangaratta, or so? Are we going to use the same argument that just because the people went to the circus that their vote counts, and the other people that live outside our region, their vote doesn't count because it was on a petition? I don't think we need to get into that, but what we do need is actually, well, let's take this back to the community and do some sort of formal consultation and really get evaluation about what does our community want, and let them speak to us instead of us probably speaking for pocketfuls within the community. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
So for the third time in this chamber, I will say it again, this motion was never about banning circuses with exotic animals in Wodonga. It was just focused on council-owned land. This was always about acknowledging that there are people in our community who don't want to see council endorsing a very outdated practice. So I moved the motion that council officers needed to get a proper definition, and that has finally been done and reflected in the report. Although, again, I think the report is lacking. The report, I think, is at odds with some of the stuff that is in the legal advice. And the legal advice, it actually says if you have clear definitions, it won't set a precedence. Whereas in the report, it says that it will set a precedence. I think what further reiterates the legal advice that if you have clear definitions that it won't set a precedence is in the fact that every other council in Australia that has this policy, that has not led to any other flow-on effect to petting zoos, to horse racing, to dog shows, because common sense has prevailed and the intent of all those policies was always around exotic animals. So with clear definitions, there is not an issue with that. Another thing that's interesting to note is all those policies that have just focused on council-owned land, none of them have been taken to court. The report also notes 2 online petitions, which is in the information. So one that supports council taking action, and that has 1,962 signatures, and one that doesn't support council taking action, that's got 528 signatures. The latter petition is actually incorrect and misleading. I'll read out the first sentence of that. It says, Wodonga Council have banned circuses with animals from our town. So those 500 people that have signed that online petition, you know, that's sort of done under false pretenses because council was never banning circuses with exotic animals from Wodonga. It was just focusing on council-owned land. A couple of things that are really good about this report is finally there is a clear definition, which when I raised the rescission motion back at the end of last year, I talked about the RSPCA definition, and that has been reflected in this, which is good. It also notes that Canterbury Bankstown Council, which is the largest council in New South Wales, has just unanimously adopted this policy, and the legal advice actually says that the Canterbury Bankstown is a really good example of a policy. And lastly, the report acknowledges that the RSPCA would support a ban. The actual email that they had, the RSPCA sent us, isn't available here, which is a bit disappointing, but if anyone wants to see that, please just get in contact with me. So I just wanted to finish by saying my role in this has always been to be a voice. So when a number of people get in contact with me and say, I need you to take action, when there's a petition with nearly 2,000 signatures on it saying, I want you to take action, is my role to bring it to the table and discuss, and that's what I've done.
Councillors, for true transparency, I'd like to be able to put my position to the table. And this hasn't been an easy task, and it certainly wasn't easy for our officers to pull the report together either. I have just a clarifier that if I could ask, I think it's yourself, Officer Klein, in terms of legal advice. When we sought legal advice, can you just give me some clarity around the question of, are we at risk of legal litigation if we have this policy?
So the request to our legal advisors was in relation to the rescission motion and the definitions. So we didn't specifically ask them in relation to the likelihood of legal action should there be a policy in place, but certainly the advice itself is quite clear that with clear definitions that would be unlikely.
Thanks, because it actually clears up that last remaining doubt that I had. And I think that in your role as councillor, you're often challenged personally as well as challenged there's some beliefs that you might hold quite dear and think that they're correct, but then you might be presented with another whole set of facts. And I think what I've heard from the community is that it is community land, and we have some pretty strong principles that we actually uphold as a council. So from equity and access through to being, leaving nobody behind, all of those fantastic policies that we have. And I think that I've heard from the community that they actually want us to take this stance. My biggest concern was, did it put us at risk legally going forward? And having looked and done that summer in that research myself as well across those councils who have put it in place and have been or taken up the same policy position in that it's actually been just about community land, because it's not council land, it's community land, then I think it has been pretty clear. And I think that the legal advice, it does reflect that, and that's why I wanted to ask that question, that should we have real clarity around exactly what it is that we are putting in place that is no longer tenable on our land for hire and etc. I think it's pretty clear. So it isn't about dog shows, it isn't about horse racing, it isn't about any of those things. It's very, very, very specific and quite narrow, and in a good way, because it absolutely defines it. So I won't be supporting the option of the status quo tonight that's being put up on the basis that I actually want to be able to reflect the community that I'm also hearing from as well. Councillor Mitchell, you get close.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I looked at all three options and noted that option 2 does have some merit. However, it draws out the process and it repeats work that's already done. And option 3 really goes against what we've been saying, the professional advice that we've sought and received. So I think option 1 is the way to go. Thank you.
Councillors, the motion is there before us. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Let me read out the recommendation is that the status quo remain, namely that council does not introduce policy to restrict circus activity on the land. All those in favour? Councillor Hall, Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Mildren and Councillor Watson. Against? Councillor Bennett, Councillor Speedy and Councillor Lowe. Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.3 is the Albury-Wodonga Aquatics Advisory Committee. Now, there is a recommendation on page 44. Do I have someone move that? Thank you.
I'd like to move that council declines the offer to be involved in the proposed cross-border aquatics facility advisory committee. Just the 1 point. Read that again. Move that council declines the offer to be involved in the proposed cross-border aquatics facility advisory committee.
I'd just like to foreshadow that motion. Alternate motion, yeah.
We have two options here. The first option is the cross-border aquatics facility. We also have the two cities, one community working group. And we're going to be at cross purposes with one or the other, depending on which one we go for. The most important is the two cities, one community working group. If we try and fragment, I think we're going to just find that we're going to confuse the whole situation. Quite often in situations like this, where we have, say, Albury and Wodonga councillors together, they're privy to certain information that can't be shared. Whereas on a committee, if we have councillors that are on those committees that can't share information, it just prolongs the whole process. Thank you.
Reserve, please, Madam Mayor.
I'd like to think if we as councillors, I know we can't, each councillor has valuable time, but when we put our hand up, we put our hand up to do a number of things when we become a councillor, and that was listen to our community and take feedback and take it from the community back to council. So in actual fact, we're a conduit between both community and council. So in saying that, I actually sit on the 2 cities and 1 community as our council representative. And I actually think it'd be good for me to sit on the Aquatics Advisory Committee under invitation from them because of both the position of 2 cities, 1 community, and also because we've had members of our community ask us to come and sit on an advisory of the aquatics facilities. And also, as long as it stays strategic, so as long as it stays, you know, what it should be, these advisory committees should be about strategy. So what have we got? What's our aquatics facilities we got at the moment? What are they lacking? What have they got good at? Where can they see improvement either now or into the future, and what can be provided into the future? And I'd actually like to sit in on that and listen to what the community asks for, so I can bring back to council exactly what was said in those things instead of someone else's view of what was in those advisory committee meetings. I'll leave it at that for now.
We've been asked by Albury Council to come on board with this. I don't know if we'll achieve anything substantial out of the committee, and have to be mindful that decisions made through committee don't cross over and become an issue with our contractual agreements with the pool managers. If it can work as some sort of conduit, as Danny said, to help with pool user groups, then maybe it could be a good thing. A trial in the short term may be the way to go. We'll see.
Madam Mayor, thank you for the opportunity. I believe with Aligned Leisure, who has the contract with 2 councils and 2 separate contracts, but working for the one thing, we're getting very much into operational areas here, and I'm really concerned about that. I'm happy for Aligned Leisure to have an aquatics reference group or whatever they like to do, but we're here solely to do the strategic part of our planning of our cities. And if that means for the future for another water place or extending either Albury Council's water place or our water place in waves, or it's a whole different thing. But I believe we run into some really legal areas, and it's up to Aligned Leisure to come back to the 2 councils and the staff that put these 2 contracts together through a very rigorous way of doing the contracting. And I believe we leave it as it is. And if they want to talk strategically, I'm more than happy to do that, but not on operational and day-to-day operations.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have a 2C, 1C committee, which is, its charter is to do all the strategic planning, etc., across the 2 municipalities. It seems, as Councillor Mitchell has indicated, it seems counterproductive to be putting in place another subordinate committee that if you look at the terms of reference of that committee, it very clearly looks at operational matters, and I think that's entirely inappropriate. The council, under the Local Government Act and other provisions, has a responsibility to be strategic and to allow the operational things to be undertaken by the officers that have the expertise in those fields. But I think probably the single most important part of this that really concerns me is that we are now going to dabble, after the event, Whether we've made mistakes in the contracts that we've signed with Aligned Leisure or not is irrelevant. We are now proposing to dabble within the realms of their contractual obligations with another committee that tends to sit over top of that. Now, in my understanding of the way these things work, I think we are hugely exposed to litigation as a direct consequence of anything that might come out of that. If we step on the toes of Aligned Leisure or cause them to suffer loss or cause them other adverse effect, then I would expect they have certain rights under contract law to seek remedy for those. And I don't think us getting into the realm of this sort of operational stuff actually takes us anywhere positively. I think we should stay away from the operational stuff, stick to the 2C, 1C strategic planning processes, and continue to seek to achieve those bigger picture projects such as regional swimming facilities and so on. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I completely agree in terms of comments around there's a risk that if we get into operational matters that could breach our contract, and obviously we really don't want to do that. Also, does it set a precedence that other community facilities might then ask for a councillor to be involved again? So that's also a concern. But then I also, support Councillor Lowe that if he wants to be involved in the committee at a strategic level, then he should be able to do that, and I would trust his professional judgment, also his professional dress sense, in terms of, keeping that at a strategic level.
Thank you. Before I come back to you, Councillor Mitchell, there's been some interesting debate tonight, councillors, around this, and I think that my biggest concern about this is I think the intent of Albury was to potentially have it as a strategic discussion, but when you look at those terms of reference, it absolutely very clearly says that it'll provide advice and recommendations upon policy and strategic facility and management matters. So from the get-go, this committee would be set up incorrectly. Two Cities, One Community absolutely has this as part of its strategic work to consider a regional aquatic facility for the long-term provision of water bodies for our community. So in terms of Councillor Lowe potentially being a representative, that isn't removed, that opportunity isn't taken away, because whether it be a subcommittee to 2C, 1C, or whether it be part of the greater group, absolutely, Councillor Lowe, you will get a voice and be able to sit and work at that strategic level. I'd be very concerned if we start to go right down into operational. It doesn't mean that it denigrates any of the feedback from community. It doesn't mean that we don't hear that and it isn't considered in future discussions, particularly at our operational level. Our operations team hear it clearly from us on a regular basis. So for me, having a committee of this nature, particularly with this terms of reference, is, in my opinion, inappropriate at this time. So over to you, Councillor Mitchell, for close.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just direct some words to Councillor Lowe. In regard to 2C, 1C, you being on the committee, you would see that the committee has a handle on those sort of things. I would see that participation in a second committee would send out mixed messages, and really wouldn't. We would be sending mixed messages, but not deciding on the right option very quickly. So I think to decline the offer is our best way to go.
Just, Councillor Mitchell, just what is the right option if we're not on the committee?
I'm not suggesting any options. I'm just saying that you are on one committee at the moment and joining a second committee discussing similar things with people that aren't privy to the information you may be privy to in the 2C, 1C committee might be compromising for yourself.
Okay, councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you for your respectful debate, councillors. Item 8.44. Oh, excellent. Thank you for waving that so forcefully.
So I've got a conflict on this one. So it's indirect interest by close association. My family live in the affected area.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Thank you. Okay, councillors, the very, 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 very long recommendation is there. Well, actually starts on page 62 and goes through to page 68. Councillors, do I have someone move that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Lowe. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Lowe, did you want to kick off?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have looked at this proposal in great detail. A number of things sort of stood out that worried me. I have looked into it a lot, and I now feel that the recommendation is correct. Thank you.
Okay, this is a reasonably large development and will somewhat change the feel of the local area. I've noted all the submissions sent to the council objecting to this development. There was a common theme running through all of them, and that was that the development did not reflect the neighbourhood character, clause 55. There is a good argument to say it doesn't. I feel there are many inconsistencies with council in regards to council using this clause, either in dismissing a planning permit or for approval of one. As with this development application, it says it complies. That can be subjective depending on the discussion and position. I'm supportive of development in Wodonga. The central area of Wodonga will continue to get more planning applications like this, as do many other councils that are growing like Wodonga. But we need to also be mindful that residents within whom these developments will affect and be mindful of their position. It's a balancing act for council to get everyone on the same page. Yeah, we do have to make a decision on this.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. We had a strategic planning a couple of days, and I took the opportunity during one of my lunch breaks to actually walk around the area, the precinct where this development's going to occur. And I took into account what is on Havelock Street that will overlook it, the flat roofs and things like that, where some of the residents, and I appreciate the residents who have come along tonight and who have put their issues in with the building application. But I also see so many styles of building construction in that neighbourhood. I will be supporting the recommendation tonight because we are at a stage in our city development where we're wanting to have an inner city developments, and the demographics, we won't know exactly who go into it, but there are 4 car spaces that we're going to be having to lose, and a lot of the debate with the residents are with car spaces and the increase in traffic flows, etc., etc. I think the demographics will be, because we're in walking distance to a lot of our assets in our CBA now, and as our society grows, it might be a one-car owners of some of these units. So I'm all supportive of it. I do understand where the residents are coming from, but I really do think there's such a mixture of old style right through to modern day building, I think it's a positive thing for our city.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In terms of creating higher density in the centre of our city, it's an absolute given that we have to go there, but we have to go there in a manner that reflects transitional change over time, in a manner that recognises and acknowledges the rights of those that live in adjacent areas, and recognises the rules that are specified and set out under the planning scheme at the time, and they will vary over time, and there's no doubt that strategic documentation and projects and processes from now into the next 10 or 15 years, when this sort of development picks up momentum in the city centre, it will change quite significantly. But right now, we have res code provisions which indicate rules about certain types of neighbourhood character and certain types of activities that influence and affect neighbourhood character. We have areas adjacent to this location that are of historical value, and we have, contrary, in my observation, contrary to Councillor Watson's view, the architectural design lines, flat roofs or otherwise, are significantly different broadly across this locality. If you look at the actual immediate neighbourhood that we're talking about, and we don't come back across into the town centre and areas that are zoned differently to the area that this is, and I mean areas that are not residentially capable. If you look at those, the architectural design lines are absolutely different and couldn't be any more different than what we have broadly in the area. To try and describe that, most of the architectural design lines are hipped and perhaps gable or hipped end roofs. When you look at the roof structures of the buildings that are proposed, I think the term is butterfly roof design line, which is diametrically the opposite to the vast majority of roofs in that area. In fact, I don't think there is another butterfly roof in that area. So when you look at that, there's a significant difference in character in relation to that, and that is one matter that could be regarded with some credence under the Res Code provisions or the Clause 55 provisions to support a conversation with the developer to try and change the roof design line. In my opinion, the layout and the footprint of the design is reasonably acceptable, but it's really the architectural design lines that create the problem. If we look at, and I had to declare a conflict in this particular one, but if we look at the situation that occurred in Rundle Street, I've looked back at the council resolution in relation to that, and the basis of refusing that permit was that the architectural design lines didn't fit the Elmwood estate. And I would suggest quite correctly they probably don't. However, this is very similar and if not the same. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Lowe, before I come back to you for close, councillors, this is a really important issue, so I would like to have my voice heard on this. Change can be incredibly uncomfortable, and our city has been undergoing significant change for particularly the last 3 to 4 years. This is another large change that our community is, I guess, about to start experiencing. As we see density increase, we see the transition of buildings, we see the transition of the way people live. And so absolutely we should respect the area in which those changes are occurring. There's no doubt about that. But our planning scheme clearly talks about the increase in density. We look at the utilisation of assets, and in any city centre, when you actually underpin those with good planning and what you try and achieve, when you are in close to those assets, things like walkability, things like making sure those assets are utilised, that the density is increased, is pretty much 101 in good planning. I think that we need to be pretty careful when we start sweeping with the term neighbourhood character. There is absolutely something called neighbourhood character, but I don't think that you can disclude something because it sits on the other side of the road as not contributing to the neighbourhood character and the look and feel of a space. I too walked the site a couple of times to try and really gain what perspectives it is that people are looking at. And if you stood in the front section of this development, there is no less than 10 flat roofs facing this new proposed development. In fact, if we talk about the style of roof line, in fact, on that very site is a roof line similar to what's being proposed. Will it create change? Yes, it will. And will some of that potentially be uncomfortable for that current neighbourhood experiencing that? Most probably. But this is about the change and growth of our city. And when I look from a planning perspective, I believe that our team has gone some ways, including the briefing sessions that we've had, councillors, to walk us through all of the objections and to show us very clearly where it actually does meet the planning requirements and how it actually meets those. And so, well, I know that some people in our community will not be happy. I think that I believe we can't object to this recommendation before us because it does meet the planning requirements, and in my opinion, it actually does meet the neighbourhood character when you look what is actually surrounding it. So, councillors, there is my view. Councillor Lowe, to you for close.
I'll probably, to summarise, just probably echo most of your thoughts rather than repeat them. We all know infill development's important. Car parking is probably not going to be an issue in 4 to 5 years, just with the advancement of autonomous vehicles. We've got 67% free space in our car parks in Wodonga now, so you just got to go back and look at our car parking strategy, and our car parking in the CBD is underutilised in itself there. Neighbourhood character, it's our pain in the butt for all of us. What is it? What's the definition? Whose character is it? Whose terms are they? It's one of those ones that gets me because there's no clear definition or understanding. I too went and stood on the site, and the site itself, as you suggested, Madam Mayor, was a flat roof. Right next door is a skillion. Right around it's gable. There's new in with old. So, you know, what is that neighbourhood character going to be? What was it? Or what is it? So you can stand up on the top of the cube over there and just look out on a 45 and you'll probably see a mixture between all those roofs. So where does it start? Where does it end? I'm not sure of the answer on that. But right now we have a decision to be made, and what it does is us as councillors, unfortunately, it boils down to, does it meet planning requirements? And it does. It ticks all the boxes of planning requirements. So we've got to sit here tonight and make a decision. Does it meet it? Yes or no? And that's where it'll end.
Councillors, the motion is there before us. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Could you please bring Councillor Bennett back in? That's one. There we go. Thank you. Item 10.1 is the finance report for January 2019. It is for information only. Was there any questions of staff? Otherwise, I'm going to keep moving us through. Item 10.2 is the planning report for January. Again, for information only. Was there any questions? Nope. Item 10.3 is the building report for information only. Any questions? 10.4 is the competitive services report for January. I've got a big smile from Councillor Bennett, so I'm guessing she's got a question.
Question and a comment. Cool to see design and construction of e-waste shed at the waste transfer station. E-waste is a really big issue. I didn't realise how prevalent it was and how hard it is to break that stuff down. So great to see that we're...
There's no conflict, it's for information only, and that's the best advice we received from our lawyers.
I did have a question though. So on page 89 with contracts not awarded, if you have a look, it's all around the Birrelly Park indoor cricket training facility. So I just would love a update on that one, please.
Madam Mayor, through you, Councillor Bennett. Council closed the tenders for the project some weeks ago now. We had the project is made up of about 14 works packages. When the tenders were evaluated, the total tender sum was above the allocated budgets for that particular project. In some instances, council officers noted that I think six or eight of the 14 packages, there were only single responses. So we elected to perhaps go out on a selected tendering basis and try and canvass additional suppliers for those. At the same time, we also decided that while we were out and the timeframes and the validity of the closed tenders was reaching the end of their validity period, that we would go out for all 14 tenders. But what we did this time, as we did the last time, we made it more clear to prospective tenderers that a single tender can be submitted that covers all 14 or 12 or 10 or 8 packages. And we're hoping the retender allows us to receive a more competitive bid, Madam Mayor. That will be all revealed on the 26th of this month, next Tuesday, when we open those tenders and we take a further look at them and assess them.
Sorry, just while we're there, so when will councillors and then ultimately the community find out successfully or if the tenders have come in on budget?
Madam Mayor, I can't give you an exact indication of what packages will come to the councillor table. You'd be aware that anything over 200 comes here, but that most of them may well be under 200. If there is a single tenderer that picks up a large number of the packages, then that will most likely come this way. But I would think within probably 2 weeks of the closure, we'll be in a better position to provide some indication of how we're going and how we're tracking against the budget.
Okay, councillors, that 10.5 is Assemblies of Councillors, again for information only. Item 10.6 is the Decisions Register, again for information only. I'm skipping through those unless there is a question. Item 11 is notices of motion, which there is none. Item 12.1, petition. There is one petition tonight being tabled. You've got a conflict. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have an indirect conflict as the proposed motion that's been, or recommendation that's been put to council raises connection with businesses associated with the Junction Place area, and my business has previously been engaged at least one of those businesses.
You look like you're ready to jump on it. Item 12.1 is the petition for parking restrictions in Church Street, and the recommendation is there on page 104. You've got an old...
Yes, I've got a motion. So councillors, you should have that in front of you. It's 2, so that council officers begin formal discussions with businesses in the Junction Place precinct as requested by the petitioners to inform the report to be presented to the March council meeting.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I've got that clear. So you've added, so it's the recommendation plus the additional one you've just read out. So there's actually two items, item 1, which is that recommendation, and item 2, which councillor Bennett has just read out. Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, councillor Lowe. Councillor Bennett.
So normally we would do something called laying the petition on the table, which means it gives the officers a bit more time to come up with some information. But I think it's pertinent that we act on this a bit more quicker and get that consultation with those affected businesses happening sooner than waiting another month. I think, and it really needs to be consultation, so really working with what will work for them as well as everyone involved, not council making a decision, but actually being really consultative with those businesses.
I'll echo Councillor Bennett's thoughts, and I think the key there is, so it's not laid on the table for another month and then we come up with a decision, so where it could be a 2-month wait for these retailers and their clientele in the region. So they want to hear answers, and they want to hear what it is now, and they want to contribute to solutions to the parking down there. So I fully support this motion. Thank you.
It's probably just a question of clarification, and it might be through the acting CEO, is because we have changed parking regulations down there, does it go back to what was there, or do we continue? I just want clarification for the community so they're very aware of what's happening.
Through you, Madam Mayor. The parking restrictions will stay as it is at the moment until we return the report back to council in the March council meeting.
Oh yeah, I'd just like the community to really know where we stand on this issue, so thanks for that.
Councillor Bennett, did you have anything to close?
Look, I did just want to mention, I've just reread everything just to make sure everyone's really clear on my motion. So, because the recommendation, the last couple of words I would get crossed off that because it actually says lay on the table. So just to make sure it's exactly clear. So it's that the petition seeking action by council in relation to the parking restrictions in Church Street be received, full stop. So, and then the second one, council officers begin formal discussions, just so everyone's clear on that one.
As the seconder, are you happy with that change? Yep. And did any other councillors need to speak to that, given that there's been that minor adjustment? No. Councillors, the motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. I've got to come out confidential. Thank you. Item 13 is council seal, of which there is none. 14, urgent business, of which there is none. 15 is question time. I think there's one question. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have a question from Michelle Cowan, who I'd like to acknowledge is in the audience tonight. Michelle has provided a preamble to her questions, and the preamble is around the Wodonga Hill strategy that was adopted by council and concerns relating to updates, so no updates being provided to the ratepayer or the residents of Wodonga regarding the work that the Wodonga Advisory Group has undertaken, nor the progress of the Wodonga Hill strategy. So the questions Michelle has asked tonight is, can council provide information to the ratepayer and residents on advice provided by the Hills Advisory Group to council, and what work has been done to implement the Wodonga Hill strategy? The second question is, can council also advise on as to how Wodonga ratepayers can be kept informed and involved in the implementation of the Wodonga Hill strategy? As this isn't an item on the agenda tonight, Michelle, I will take it on notice and ensure that we provide a written response to you.
Thank you. Other questions? Nope. Thank you. So, Gallery, that leaves us to move into a section of confidential business. So we would need to clear the gallery while we do that piece of work. But we do invite you back in because we actually have an Eagle Award winner tonight, and it's a pretty special award and always given to incredibly special people in our community. So please don't go far. You're welcome to stand out in our foyer there. You're actually going to have a couple of councillors join you in a minute, as we all have, there's 3 of us have got conflicts of interest. So if you could just please just step out into our foyer, and then we will invite you back in to do the nice part of the evening where we get to talk about our fantastic community. Thank you. Thank you for waiting and being patient. Thank you. Yep. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. Councillors, we do need to adopt the confidential items through this part of the process. Can I have someone move to adopt those? Thanks, Councillor Bennett. Thanks, Councillor Hall. Anybody need to speak against those? If I could put the motion, please. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Rightio. Which, strangely enough, that just leaves me to close this part of the meeting and then do our Eagle Award winner, who's here. For all those online, if I could please invite you to make sure you join us on Monday, the 18th of March at 6 p.m. So thank you. If we could sign out from that, that would be terrific.